Hello, everybody. This is Abbas Kazaronian with the Advanced Resolution Management podcast here. We've got a very, very special episode today. We are introducing the one, the only Justice Abbi Silver to not just our podcast, but of course, ARM. Very, very welcome. And thank you for being here, Justice Silver.
Well, thank you so much for having me to this podcast.
Yeah, and honestly, we're all super excited to have you at ARM, and we cannot wait to work with you. And I'm sure, our viewers and our listeners are definitely very excited to be working with you in that capacity as well. As kind of like an introductory, kind of podcast and interview, I just wanted to get a little bit, a couple things from you moving forward as you're coming into private practice. And number one is kind of, transitions well into that, which is you have served so long as a public servant, which obviously I'm sure everybody's very grateful because you've been such a phenomenal jurist. But how do you feel about coming into ARM as a neutral and going into private practice after so long being in public service?
Well, I'm very excited to do something new. That is for sure. I've been a judge almost 20 years. I'm just shy of 20 years and 8 years on the appellate court. And anybody that knows my record as far as serving on every single court in the state, I'm probably due for a job change if you look at my resume.
Absolutely.
So I don't know, every couple of years it seems that I need to be challenged in a different area, and I'm up for the challenge. I'm really excited to be going into this field, especially with all of the other ARM mediators or neutrals. Many of them, obviously, I worked with on the district court bench, and Justice Abbi, I worked on the appellate courts with her. Okay. And it's just so exciting to be part of this really dynamic group of individuals. So I'm excited to come to ARM.
Phenomenal. We're all excited to have you on board. So kind of kicking into gear now, you're going to be full-time neutral at ARM, giving us a broad brush bird's eye view into kind of your philosophy. What's your kind of philosophy on ADR going into it as a mediator and an arbitrator?
Well, my philosophy when I was a settlement conference judge was really to allow the parties just to facilitate ideas between the parties on resolution and how they themselves can come together to resolve their dispute, whatever that may be. And each case is so unique, each one. So there's no two cases that are alike, having done, many settlement conferences in the past. But my job is really to make the parties on both sides feel comfortable with me and respect me, as well as maybe some of my input regarding the strengths and weaknesses of their case. And hopefully they will come to that resolution, because I do believe that, having done that for many years prior to going into ARM, that the best feeling in the world is when I shouldn't say in the world, but the best feeling is really coming out of a mediation and all the parties are so satisfied with the result. They have certainty, the parties have closure, and it's just like that relief of not having to go forward in litigation. So it's pretty simple. And that's pretty much how I roll with mediations.
Yeah. I think, as a litigator myself, one thing I would find particularly exciting about using a neutral like yourself is the perspective that you don't necessarily get with other neutrals, because you have been on every layer of the court system and the judicial system, and you've seen it all happen at different levels. You have an insight that maybe other neutrals do not, because you know how it's going to shake out at trial, because you've seen, these trials before you, and you know how it's going to shake out if it's appealed. And, when someone is there, beating their chest in the mediation room going, well, I'm going to appeal that issue. And, you have that insight that says, well, I can tell you how I would rule on that, and I think that's actually a very, very unique place to be coming in from. And I think it's very, very exciting.
Yeah, I agree. It's unique too, because I'm the only person in the state that's ever been on both Court of Appeals and Supreme Court. So even when the parties are talking about well, what would happen on appeal? They really don't know because they don't know what court they're going to. And that is something that I know right off the bat. I know exactly or pretty much where they're going to go. I know exactly with our push down model, most likely where they're going to shake out on appeal, which court. And having worked with all of the judges on both courts, I have a very unique insight as to how I guess people's philosophies are on those courts regarding almost any type of case.
For sure.
And so that is definitely unique.
Very unique and exciting. Absolutely. And then, like, probably when you began your career, ADR had a different level of importance to what it does in 2022. Like, I mean, looking at it from both the judicial perspective, like when you were a judge, and both as now a private mediator, how has that importance changed and evolved to where we sit today, do you think?
Well, I think just the biggest thing is COVID. The backlog of what is going on in the 8th Judicial or 2nd Judicial in Washoe. I can't speak as much to the rurals, although I've got to believe that there's a backlog no matter what court you go to. It's just horrendous what's gone on in the 8th because let's face it, you couldn't have jury trials. So because of that, I think there's a real need to get cases and the parties, they want to move on with their lives. And they want the litigation to end. And so I would be there for them if they would, end up choosing me as one of their mediators at ARM to resolve it for them if that's the route they choose, rather than go through and sit and wait for yet another trial date, especially if they get continued. Sure. In big civil cases, if both sides, I mean, before I even went to the appellate court, there were some judges when I would do settlement conferences that had like 2 and 3 year ordinary courses. So if they got bumped at calendar call, they were looking at another 2 or 3 years before their trial was going. And so there's definitely this need, especially with COVID, to resolve cases smoothly and efficiently.
Absolutely. And before we kind of wrap this up, I have one other question. From a litigator's perspective, I think, I would want to know this. I know there's a lot of people going to be very, very excited that you're joining and are immediately going to want to use you. But from the litigator's perspective that are going to be booking you, Justice Silver, as a litigator, I would want to know what is like the 1 or 2 things that are most important to Justice Silver that I would like bring to the mediation, whether it's in my brief, the way I present the case, like, in that negotiation process, like what is it that you're looking for from the litigants that are going to be hiring you before you in that mediation process?
Well, I certainly respect at the beginning of any mediation, especially as one of the sides is speaking with me with their client, to be exactly the advocate they want to be in front of that client. And I respect that. I did in the courtroom and I do outside of the courtroom. I think that plays a very important role in that party trusting their attorney who's got to be on their side. But as the mediation continues, I just am hopeful that both sides would be very upfront and frank with me as to all the facts and issues in the case so that I can do the best job as far as making recommendations as to perhaps things that they might want to consider in order to resolve the case. It's very hard to resolve the case when one side just is not being upfront with maybe some of the things that are really problematic in the case. And as long as you have an open mind, it's just like anything. And I have an open mind going into things. There's many times that, I'll read briefs as well, and I'll think I may have a good sense of where it is, but, you really have to hear both sides, and you really got to be open to both sides. And all that information comes out throughout the mediation. So, I think if they're upfront and honest, and I definitely will be as well, and hopefully, again, at the end of the day, we can make, it is a compromise, but at least both sides are satisfied with the end result.
Yeah, I think what you've kind of alluding to, for me, is very important when I'm dealing with a neutral, being honest with the weaknesses in your case as well as just the strengths, because that gets you a lot more credibility with the neutral. I think it kind of brings them on side a little bit, because I think, they're like, okay, this is a believable individual, and, I want to assist even more in bringing about that compromise. So I totally agree with that. That's phenomenal advice. Thank you. And with that said, we just wanted to do a brief introduction. And again, welcome to ARM. So happy to have you. And I'm sure all our clients and customers are going to be super excited and stoked to be seeing this video introducing you to the panel. And I wish you nothing but the best, and so excited to work with you. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you too. And I'm excited to work with everyone at ARM. Thank you again.